Unsolved and Unseen, the podcast where the shadows hold secrets and the unspeakable waits to be discovered. From chilling mysteries to forgotten tales, join us as we uncover the stories the world has left behind. Are you ready to step into the unknown?
Welcome to episode 4 of Unsolved and Unseen, the podcast where we delve into chilling mysteries, true crime, and the unexplained events that keep us up at night. I'm Chris. Joining me as always is my co-host Octavio. And today we've got the story of Barry Sherman, a Canadian pharmaceutical billionaire and philanthropist, and his wife Honey Sherman, also a well-known philanthropist whose untimely deaths in 2017 remain a mystery to this day.
Yeah, no.
Octavio.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. No, it's exactly that, man. I think spoiler alert, right? The reality is, this is still something that the Toronto police are having trouble with, right? But let's start as we always do, right? Let's set the stage. Barry Sherman is not just a normal billionaire. We've talked about it, right? He's a tycoon. He's a brilliant engineer. He got his degree from MIT. He was known as an entrepreneur that revolutionized, the entire, pharmaceutical industry in Canada. He was the CEO of Apotex, which is going to come into play a lot in the story and what we know about Barry and Honey Sherman. And then I'll tell you, man, prior to that, owning Apotex, people should know a little historical that he actually owned or, actually bought into Empire Laboratories, which was owned by his uncle, right? Who eventually sold it to him, and from there, which again, like I said, plays into Apotex, he was able to develop his own company, in 1974. You should know he took that company from literally inception, concept. This is what he wanted to do. Be one of the largest generic drug manufacturers in Canada, with several hundreds of employees to what closer to the end was about over 10,000 employees and provided medicines to 150 plus countries. As I mentioned earlier, Barry and his wife Honey, they were just regular entrepreneurs. They're also renowned philanthropists. They left a lasting impact on healthcare and the communities around them. And of course, Chris, me and you talked about it, for, not very common. You do hear about people with, they generate a lot of wealth. Not all of them have to be so giving. Well, that's not the case with Barry and Honey Sherman, right? The reality is they were extremely well known for providing, to, various charities across entire Canada. So, here we are, December 13th, late in the afternoon, and 75-year-old Barry Sherman and 69-year-old Honey Sherman. And if you're following along, on YouTube, you're, seeing some of the links that we're going to be providing. We can also put them in our show notes. But on December 13th, they're both in Barry's office, right? They're at Apotex headquarters. They're reviewing design changes to their new house in Forest Hill, which is really downtown Toronto. They're looking at moving in from their current home to their new home, right? So typical couple finding themselves late at night, kind of reviewing all the last bit of documents, changes, telling their staff some of the things that, they have to take care of before, personal items to professional items, even on the move, right? It's definitely a life-changing event. And this was no small feat, especially leaving their big mansion. So unfortunately, as people would find out later, this was really the last time that they're both seen together. So that same evening, on the 13th, Barry sent what was known as a routine email, right? And this, Chris, working in, professional IT industry or contracting industry, depending on, the work schedule, some of the objectives you got to accomplish, projects, efforts, initiatives, you name it. Hey, you're known for working at, various type of hours, right? So his staff was very accustomed to Barry sending out a routine email very late in the afternoon, almost doing like a wrap up of what he was tracking that got accomplished for the day, what needs to get done for the following day and throughout the week, just making sure that they're still on task. That said, what was strange was they knew Barry to also be an insomniac. And in fact, there's something that I'd like you to pull up, Chris, which is really kind of, help really paint that picture of, the immediate signs of like something might be wrong with this couple. Well, Barry, suffering from insomnia, like I mentioned, didn't call anyone that night. And I can tell you, the reality, Chris, is, as someone who like suffered from like serious issues of insomnia, actually had to get, properly medicated for it and dealt with it over several years. It's highly unusual for you not to have someone on your, like, basically in your digital Rolodex that you can call up, in your contact that you could call up late in the afternoon, late at night, to catch up or to just, really, keep you entertained or, you name it, right? In my case, obviously, it was always talking about politics, business, true crime, you name it, right? But that's the reality. But as you pull that up, Chris, I find it interesting because this is, in true entrepreneur fashion, in true businessman fashion, immediately, like I said, it was a red flag, right? They knew he suffered from insomnia. They expected somebody from his staff or close family and friends expected a phone call from Barry that night. But here we go. This probably the initial stab that probably explains those entrepreneurs and, some of the things that they deal with. This is actually not uncommon. So, Chris, if you don't mind, could you read off like the first 9?
Yeah, no, Octavio, I mean, you probably know better than anybody that the life of the entrepreneur kind of never ends, right? It's continuously going. When you go to sleep, your businesses are still running, especially if it's a global enterprise like it was for Barry. Now, Barry just happens to be a billionaire. So I can't believe you're making me try to humanize him here. But yeah, man, I mean, 87.7% of entrepreneurs struggle with, if you don't already know, I don't like billionaires. Yeah. I think billionaires are fairly unethical. And I think there's a lot of other people that feel the same way. And that might have a little something to do with, the fact that he ended up dead. Yeah. But anyways, yeah, let me go into this. So almost 90% of entrepreneurs struggle with at least one mental health issue, which is crazy. Yeah. Which one are you, brother?
I know, man. Yeah. Not to disclose on this call, I might lose more than just this podcast, So.
but I know your medicine cabinet stock, though. Right? Number 2 is 50% of entrepreneurs struggle with anxiety, right? That's not like super surprising, I don't think, right? Because when you kind of like reject a very secure job and like a regular paycheck for, a paycheck that is directly linked to how hard you're working and how hard you're concentrating on it, it can get very stressful.
100%.
Number 3 is almost 35% of entrepreneurs experience burnout, right? I'm sure a lot of that happens within like the first year or two. This dude had been doing it for a long time. I mean, this guy was like that was his whole thing as being an entrepreneur. So he probably hadn't burned out. But 27% of entrepreneurs have a poor work-life balance, right? That's like the classic, Hallmark movie, financial husband is spending all his time at work, blah, blah, blah. So we have a pretty good concept of that. Number 5, more entrepreneurs said they were concerned about mental health. More entrepreneurs said that they were more concerned about mental health than physical health. Which makes sense, but
completely attest to that, Chris. We've talked about it, right? The reality is like, here I am trying to take care of, trying to get, just left the military where I'd always been physically fit, and the reality is with all the different businesses and things going on, it's like, sometimes it's like, dude, I can't even get rid of the mental stressors before I can even focus on trying to take care of my physical health, maybe start with that. And people would try to tell you, oh man, it's a triad, right? Sleep, diet and exercise. I completely agree. Don't disagree.
And the rest of these here, that's through, I think they got 17 statistics on here. They all kind of get after the fact that entrepreneurs lead a stressful life, and they're statistically likely to have some form of mental health issue. And so that goes back to Barry. He's probably stressed. He's got some poor work-life balance. He's maybe got some loneliness and isolation going on, tons of anxiety, tons of stress,
Yep.
etc.
Yeah, no, Chris, I mean, again, 75 years old, but the reason why I really wanted to bring up this article, like I said, it was like the immediate red flag, right? This guy's not calling anyone. And this isn't just like a normal study, right? We talked about this, right? You know, it was two guys, they went out and, really surveyed, what was it, like 227 entrepreneurs across 46 countries, right? So it wasn't just in one isolated area or small pool. I mean, they really did a thorough investigation and survey to determine, hey, what are some of the different, like insights on what a lot of entrepreneurs have to deal with or do deal with in terms of mental health, right? And no one likes to talk about it. Men even more so, but luckily, you've seen the movement as of lately, that, men are being a lot more open about it, a lot more honest about it. So not to go on a tangent, but just to dial it back in, hey, like, that's a red flag, right? People were already seeing something going on, right? So what happens the next day? Let's put ourselves in December 14th, right? And he didn't show up to work. So next red flag immediately. So this is, now it's compiling behavior. A guy who's been doing this since 1974 is now December 14th, 2017. And you had two immediate red flags. Small as it may seem, immediately people, started realizing, hey, something's not right with the Sherman family. So now it's December 15th, right? 2 days after in 2017, and Barry and Honey were not expected to be home, yet their vehicles were seen in the driveway when, as Eli's Stern, the realtor, pulls up to provide a showing to prospective buyers, and of course their respective realtor on the current home that they were selling. Of course, this is early in the morning, so the cleaning staff were already there. They were using the key that was in that recently installed lockbox that you're quite familiar with. Pull out, get the key, and unlock the door, and start going about your business. Well, the cleaning staff was doing exactly that, right? They were working their way through this massive building, right? Literally classified as a mansion, 6-bedroom, 9 bathrooms, in North York, Ontario, Canada. Eli Stern, that potential buyer, and their realtor were kind of working their way throughout the house as well. But one of the final areas, Chris, as you know, is this swimming pool, right? It's the biggest thing they wanted to showcase, right? Well, as Elise starts making her way down there, Chris, like you to really kind of pull up that pool area just to kind of paint that picture for people.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, Chris, as you look at the swimming pool, right, imagine this, right? Elise walks ahead of the other realtor, right? She's like literally coming all the way down. Yeah. From over here. Yeah, right? Exactly. From that other side. Yeah, right. And she immediately sees, like, as she explains later to investigators, like two silhouettes on the other side, right? They're kind of like their backs turned, so she can't really make them out, but she can't really tell what it is, in fact, like, I think she reported that she thought that, like, it was probably the Shermans, like, literally experimenting on some kind of weird yoga. I mean, like, literally that was her statement to the cops, right? It's like, I think they were experimenting over there or something like that. But what she did know, and something that, like, she immediately, reported as well, was like, things weren't right? The reality is, like, it didn't feel right, that, like, it didn't look like they were moving, so she immediately thought, okay, maybe she, disturbed them or something like that. She'll probably come back to it. I couldn't really make out what it was, but I just know that they were in some kind of weird position. And again, their bodies were, against that railing on the other side of the pool, right? Well, that said, what does she do, right? Typical realtor fashion. I've actually had this happen to me when doing an inspection at home, when they felt like, okay, hey, something's not right in this room, or something's not right, in this place that I'm supposed to show you, or section, or they're still doing renovations there. They kind of shy away from it. Now, of course, it's your job to kind of make your way back in there, but the realtor does, at least does a great job at kind of, let me bring them back. Let me tell them, or I'm sorry, let me turn back around, tell the other realtor, tell the buyer, hey, hey, they're doing, something in this area. We'll come back to this, and kindly takes them upstairs. I can imagine, Chris, what happens next is, what does she do? She sends the housekeeper downstairs. So she's probably talking to her, to at this point, let her know, hey, something didn't feel right down there. Can you go check on the Shermans and see what's going on? He was like, I want to show the pool, we got a prospective buyer, et cetera, et cetera. Well, dude, the housekeeper does exactly that. She goes out there, and what does she do? She finds both of the bodies right there, tied up against a rail and dead. She comes like.
So just to paint the picture for those of you that can't see it or are listening only, the Shermans have an indoor pool, and the pool is in the middle of the room, and surrounding this pool is a rail, kind of like the handy capable rail that you see in the bathrooms, but it's about waist height and it surrounds about half of the pool. And what the way that the Shermans were situated, they were both sitting, legs straight out in front of them. And they were right next to each other, so shoulder to shoulder. And the only thing that was keeping them up, right, their torsos upright in a seated position, was the fact that they had a belt wrapped around their neck and then tied to the railing behind them. And they were both sitting like this, and they both had jackets that were pulled down around their arms to kind of keep their arms by their sides.
Yeah.
So that's the gruesome scene that they walked in on. And Octavio, I'll hand it back to you for what happens next.
No, yeah. So again, now it's, hey, what do they do next, right? The realtor, the housekeeper, everybody that's there involved. So they immediately, the housekeeper tells the realtor, hey, definitely need to call the cops, right? We need to let them know what's going on, what happened with the situation. And, my initial impression was when I heard that she actually took about an hour to call the cops after, they had initially seen the bodies. I got to tell you, man, Chris, you're definitely pulling it up right now. But, to explain to the listeners is, again, Chris, initially I was like, wait, why did it take an hour, man? This is starting to piss me off, man.
It seemed kind of fishy, huh?
Yeah. Or you're losing valuable time, especially if this was a recent event. Now, that being said, what also kicked in immediately was okay, wait, as I'm reading along the story and I'm hearing and looking up the different reports and, checking the different, readings and articles, Chris, she called the next of kin, right? And we, me and you served in the military. We know what a casualty assistant officer is, right? And their sole responsibility, or one of their many responsibilities, is in the event of a death of a service member, they're there to really help out and contact the next of kin and notify them that their loved one has passed, right? So, I actually, took a back seat, or really took a step back, I would say, and realized that, as you read further into the story and hear their reports, that's what she explained to the detectives, to anybody, to the housekeeper, is they got 4 kids. Let me make contact with all of them and let them know that their parents, were found dead in their home. So
quick side note, Octavio. Yeah. We were just talking about CAOs. There's a really it's a pretty good movie called The Messenger, and it's Woody Harrelson plays a casualty assistance officer. He's this older, kind of grizzled casualty assistance officer that's been on this assignment for years or whatever. And their whole job, and this is during the GWAT era, right? Global War on Terrorism. Their whole job is to just go around to family members and notify them that, their service member had been killed in action or had died or something like that. And I mean, shit, it's not a fun movie, man, but it's pretty good. It's really heavy hitting and everything. So yeah, if you get a chance, watch The Messenger. It's a pretty decent movie, and we love Woody Harrelson, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Good.
Well, yeah. So back to kind of where they're at right now. The reality is the investigative team immediately shows up. Police officers are there, and again, rightfully so, on her calling next of kin. What happens? This is 2017, man. Social media, Twitter, all these different, applications are just as fast, if not more responsive than local news outlets, right? So they're already there. Media's on the site, everybody within the community is actually in around the area. So you can imagine the intensity, especially because they weren't just normal people, Chris. We mentioned it several times. Philanthropists, billionaires, entrepreneurs. I mean, provided, were very well respected in the community, provided to a lot of charity events. You knew people were showing up at this house, right? So again, more respect to the realtor. Can't stress that enough. That said, some interesting questions that came about right away, man. Did you hear about the glove or the gloves and the papers of Barry or the cell phone? Did you catch that like on any of your readings?
So the only thing that I know, Octavio, and fill me in where I'm not right, is that it seemed like stuff kind of was not in the right place or not in the place that it should have been. Were it like a suicide?
Yeah.
Right. And so, please fill me in a little bit more.
Yeah, no. So that plays into it, right? So I think, the immediate reaction from the detectives was like, okay, hang on. This looks like, they were like, oh, this is like I want to say their initial reports was like a double suicide, right? That's their initial reaction. But they kept coming out and using words like suspicious. They didn't really want to talk about the cause of death or the manner of death, which we'll talk about that in a second. But their initial reaction is like, this is probably a double suicide. Well, again, what was glanced over, what I felt like was compelling, and it's like, why didn't anybody talk about this like initially further, was what I mentioned, right? Barry's gloves were in the garage, with like some papers of like inspection reports of the other house, right? And how about the housekeeper? The housekeeper openly admitting to the realtor and the cops that like, hey, something you should know, like I just found like, Miss Sherman, Honey Sherman's like cell phone, in one of the bathrooms that's like hardly ever used. And like literally her statement was one of the most like an unused bathroom, so that to me was like highly suspicious.
I do have another question. So it's not super uncommon for people to show the house that they own while they're still living in it, but they're billionaires, right? Yeah. So are they still like actively living in this house, or are they somewhere else? Like, because initially nobody was expecting them to be there, right? There was a scheduled showing that day, and they roll up to do the showing, and their cars are in the driveway, and the realtor's like, "Oh, that's weird. They're not supposed to be here." So like, my question is, are they actually living in this house, or like, do they have their own kind of effects and personal items and stuff laying around, or is it like 100% showroom ready?
No. So definitely actively still living in the house, right? Definitely still there. But yes, of course, typical agreements when you're doing your active showings is, they, go vacate, go somewhere. And so again, that's why I think that was one of the initial reactions of the realtor. It's like, okay, probably, a little weird that they're, still here in the house as I'm doing the showing. No one, tends to be there at all, right? That's something coordinated events. But yeah, no, man. Well,
yeah, and really quickly, Octavio, I just want to go into the difference between cause of death and manner of death, because I never knew this either. And this is short. This is from WashingtonCounty.gov, right? So the cause of death is this, and I'm reading straight from the website. Yeah. The cause of death is the specific injury or disease that leads to death. The manner of death is the determination of how the injury or disease leads to death. And there are 5 manners of death: natural, accidental, suicide, homicide, and undetermined. And which manner of death was so we know what the cause of death, right? What was the cause of death here in this case?
So in fact, it went from the police detectives saying that like, hey, right now we're treating the deaths as suspicious with no signs of forced entry and no suspects. Well, when the forensic pathologist, and this is, I should differentiate, this is the forensic pathologist of the actual, Toronto police come in, they find the cause of death to be the ligature neck compression, I guess is the official cause of death, right? Not the manner of death, right? Again, the manner of death initially still remained to be, they wanted it, the police were saying this is a murder-suicide, right? In fact, they ended up thinking that until like early 2018. This was December of 2017 when they found the bodies. So all the way up to early 2018. And I'll mention why in a second. But yeah, it's important because you should know that, ligature strangulation is what's it usually caused by, right? They report as being caused by binding or tie-in. So, which that medical examiner, the forensic crime team, along with all the detectives on the scene, determined that was what led them to believe the manner of death being a murder-suicide. That Barry killed his wife before taking his own life. Now, of course, Chris, we talked about this, right? The family, man. This is a billionaire family, man. What would you do? Like, what's your initial reaction? Are you going to just sit idly by, listening to the local cops? Or are you going to pay for your own team, man?
Yeah, of course.
Yep.
Of course.
Yep.
Well, what was the other thing? The other thing that the police kind of found out. I mean, I think it was a pretty obvious thing. But what was weird about the position that they were found in, Octavio?
Yeah. So that's where what we ended up seeing was, and as screen sharing here is the positions were put in something that were, kind of resembled the sculpture that was inside the house, right? The way Barry was, with his legs, spread forward in front of him with, his right leg over his left. And then the way Honey Sherman was completely, laid to, basically laid to rest. Both of them resembled the sculpture that was in their, kitchen area, right? In their house or kitchen living room area, really. So it was completely, it was completely suspicious. They, all these things started compiling. And I think that's honestly, Chris, I think that plus the fact that the kids felt very strongly that there's no way my parents, or my dad would commit, a double suicide, right? That he would kill my mom, or that, and, take his own life. So what do, man? They hired their own, investigative team, right? And it starts with a guy that, you and I both looked up to see how credible he was Brian Greenspan, right? He was a retired criminal defense lawyer. Yeah. And what's he do? He hires a team of teams, right? 3 private investigators, one of them very well respected, retired Toronto police detective. And of course, this guy that I think plays a vital role into, future cause of death and manner of death, and to why this case, I think, is still open till this day. Dr. David, I think it's like Chison or something, I don't know. Interesting. But we got, show notes to show it. But, he wasn't just a nobody, man. Retired chief forensic pathologist for Ontario. And he was the one that was really tasked to conduct, another autopsy. Active at the time, of course. But unfortunately, what I will say is the results when it came to the cause of death was still the same. It was a ligature strangulation. But
I do want to say something about the ligature strangulation. Yeah. And correct me if I'm wrong, but there's a way that they can tell when it's strangulation or not. And even though they were saying that it was strangulation, this particular condition wasn't met. And that condition is, in strangulations, they oftentimes see there's this bone in the neck. It's directly underneath your jaw, right? Yeah. But not quite at your Adam's apple. It's called the hyoid bone. And when that's broken, that's a pretty telltale sign of, oh, this person was strangled in a struggle. Yeah. And so the hyoid bone in both Barry and Honey was intact. Right?
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. No, both forensic pathologists, noted that, right? It was a ligature strangulation, but both of their bones, literally kind of in the, exactly in the area that you described it, was intact. So not uncommon for, strangulations, but or rather, so not uncommon for strangulations for it to be intact, but it's usually, like you said, a telltale sign that that was the no prep, how it was completely done.
Violent,
it was definitely a violent act. And this is how they died, right? Yeah, no, that's exactly it. I think that, that kind of brings us back to, okay, so what's going on, right? At this time, second team comes in, hired by the family. What are some of the results? Cause of death? Yes, the same. But then at the same time, you start seeing that the Toronto police, and that's probably just their, honestly, putting more man hours into it per se. They're starting to realize, okay, I think we're starting to, reach more of undetermined. We don't think that the manner of death is really determined. And at the same time, the private investigative team, the private forensic pathologist, they rule it without a shadow of a doubt that the manner of death was not a murder-suicide, but a double homicide. Now that plays into, as you know, some initial theories, Chris. And that's where I got to tell you, man, I know we had some difference of opinions on here. What were your initial thoughts, whether it was a double homicide, a double suicide, or a murder-suicide, like the police? What was your initial thoughts on all this?
Man, my initial thoughts are double homicide, because when the fuck was the last time a billionaire killed themselves?
Yeah.
Never. It doesn't happen. Billionaires live great lives, but one thing they do make is a lot of enemies, right? So, I mean, there was because mo money, mo problems. You know what I mean? Like, there was, first of all, the way that Barry made his billions is in the pharmaceutical industry. So he did a great job. Here, you know what? I'm going to pull up something from Wikipedia, right? That kind of goes over Barry Sherman's reputation and personality. I'm going to read like a couple of quotes here, right? So this says, Sherman had a mixed reputation, or what the National Post called two legacies. Sherman and his wife were described by Toronto Mayor John Tory as kind, good people, and was widely praised for his philanthropic giving. On the other hand, Morton Shulman, a physician and former member of the Ontario Parliament, who late in his life fought Sherman over drug development, called him, and this is creative, the only person I've ever met with no redeeming features whatsoever, right? And then University of Ottawa law professor Amir Attaran described Sherman as, quote, a deplorable human being in reference to his business practices, claiming that he gouged Canadians with high drug prices. And in quotes again, Canadians pay more for generic drugs than almost every other country, and he, Barry, sought to manipulate our system to enrich himself and impoverish Canadian patients who used his drugs. So all that to say, there's a lot of people that wouldn't mind seeing Barry dead, right? But there was a couple of specific folks that really came up during the investigation and some of the, when talking to people, right? One of them was Carrie Winters, and Octavio, I'll let you talk about Carrie. And then the other one was none other than Barry's son. Wow. Big surprise there, right? And then there was a couple of other theories too. And I'll just say this before you go into Carrie. In I guess the years in the years that they were living at this particular place, which, as I understand, is not like a super long time, or only a couple of years, but they had like hundreds of break-ins, burglary type break-ins, right? Which is like 150, which is like 1.5 hundreds, but we'll call it hundreds. But they would like repel. There's people like would rappel in from the skylights, and they're professional burglars, by the way, because Mrs. Sherman, Honey is her name. I keep wanting to say Bunny. It's probably from man, what was that Jeff Bridges movie back in the day? Oh shit. Gosh dang it, what is it? The young wife Bunny that like she leaves. Oh, what is it? This is going to kill me, man. Anyways, where was I? Oh, yeah, she's got like hundreds. Oh, yes, the Big Lebowski. Yes, where Bunny runs away. Okay, but anyways, this is Honey Sherman. She's got like hundreds of millions of dollars worth of jewelry, and I guess the whole neighborhood knows about it because she gets burglarized pretty often. Maybe it's the way they're selling the house. I don't know. Anyways. So the police, I mean, like, it's a theory. It is a theory, right? Does it make a ton of sense? Or are there other theories that make more sense? Yes, but a burglary that had gone wrong, and no forced entry, right? Like I said, they would come in. There was reports of burglars coming in through their skylight, like rappelling down. So, I guess there's, a way to get in that didn't, scratch any locks or anything like that. So
there wasn't a shortage. There wasn't a shortage of motives. There definitely wasn't a shortage of people to kill. I mean, some of the other motives, you just reminded me, is like they had like several litigations for intellectual property, right? It's like that he was. They like to say it over and over, right? He wasn't a stranger in court. Him and Apotex was very well known at winning these litigations, right? They would take people to to litigation for challenging, how they did how they produced their generic drugs. They would challenge other large pharmaceutical companies over patents. I mean, dude, big or small, it didn't matter. Like Apotex and Barry Sherman went at you. So imagine just some of those companies. And some of these companies were like known to like take massive financial losses, never recovered. I mean, I think like, one I found interesting that was never covered. And, I scoured through like multiple articles just to like, say like, hey, how did no one add this? I'm sure the Toronto police have done it by now. How did they not add like one or two of these litigations, or people that work in these different industries or companies to the list of like suspects, right? Because right before he died, he was in a suit for like, I think like $1 billion. So he was in a suit for $1 billion with like a huge generic drug competitor on intellectual property rights. And he had won that. The result was, I think I was telling you, they're very similar to his previous litigations. The competitors were either forced out of the market, were completely closed due to compliance issues that they brought on to them, or overall financial burdens, which we all know, right? You keep, putting someone into a legal battle. If they don't have the money to cover it, you just win by default, sadly. But, with billions of dollars behind you, I think it was probably easy for Barry Sherman and Apotex.
No shortage of legal fees, right?
Yeah.
Now, what about Carrie Winters, though?
Yeah.
Because that was one that is specifically talked about in the book, too.
Yeah, I got some mixed feelings on that one. I think like my initial reaction was like, wait a minute, this guy's like, one of the brothers where, just to kind of take it back to the empires and how he built his wealth is the Winter brothers, were actually, part of, or would have taken ownership of the company known as like Empire.
It was Empire, Empire Drugs or Empire Pharmaceuticals or something like
exactly,
that.
And they were,
which was the precursor to Apotex.
Yeah, well, and that's what they claimed, right? They claimed that Apotex wouldn't be anywhere if it wasn't for Empire. Well, their argument there was, hey, basically Barry, one of the stipulations, was like, hey, if, they would inherit Empire unless Barry decided to sell, which he eventually did. And I think it was like a decade later or years later, the three, brothers, put, basically Barry into a lawsuit. In fact, that was one of the $1 billion lawsuits that he had gone under litigation. And surprise, surprise, the reality is the judge ruled in favor of Barry, and the Winter brothers actually had to pay. And this, by the way, this is like days, if not weeks prior to their tragic death, right?
Right. That's super important. Dude. Like a month or two prior, the judge threw out the Winters case to inherit, I think, like 5 or 10% of Apotex, which is obviously $1 billion like mega corp. Right? So that amounts to hundreds of millions, not billions of dollars. But yeah, the judge threw it away. Which, let's be really honest here, Barry Sherman, a guy who's used to being in courts, probably knows all these judges on a first name basis, and also has got billions of dollars. The judge just threw the case away. Okay. I think probably the Winter brothers may have seen it the same way. Yeah. And so that's their like motive, right? And that's why they were scrutinized so hard.
Yeah, definitely. Right. Definitely a motive to kill. Yeah. The reality is like, I think I highlighted, it was $300,000 that they had to pay back in legal fees. So not only did you lose, you also have to pay $300,000 in damages. And
Barry, on top of that, wanted to get like another $1 million from them for, I don't know, like damages or something
like that,
like
slander and damages. I don't know,
like what the fuck?
Yeah.
What was so what did Carrie kind of like go on record to say?
It was interesting, right? We read the book, and the reality is like, they talked about it there. They talked about it in several articles that, he openly disclosed.
We didn't read the book.
Yeah.
We didn't read the book. We did the for dummies version.
Marking that. Yeah. Jared, please catch that mark. Hang on. That's Jared at 39. Dude, it's why did we say that? Why did I say we read the book? It's All right. Anyways, no, yeah, got to, just overall mixed feelings. We read, several articles and stuff on this, right? And like, what the report, like, I think they all said the same thing. The guy was super open about, his claim that, Barry and him actually, he was like, contemplating how to like, get rid of his wife, and needed, again, Carrie, one of the Winter brothers, to kind of get rid of, figure out how they could get rid of it. They were, coming up with all this plan, and apparently it wasn't executed. But again, the reason why I got mixed feelings is because there's a couple things, right? Some of the things is the credibility behind him, right? He was known as a drug addict. He took a poly and failed, but not failed where people were like, oh yeah, he failed because, he's like probably like the murderer or something like that. No, failed in the sense of like, he couldn't even answer like some of the basic questions, right? Or the story of his own stories weren't even lining up anymore, right? So I don't think it was in a manner of like I'm trying to throw them off my scent, or what you hear some murderers or predators do is they like to inject themselves back into the scene, or or the scene of the crime, or with the investigative team, play friends. We've all heard of that. I don't think this was the case. The reality is I think this guy was just quite honestly an idiot, and did probably did recall some events where Barry did probably in tongue in cheek was like, yeah, maybe you could help me get rid of my wife or something like that. I don't know, but I don't think it's credible.
I don't know, man. I think him failing the poly test is kind of telling. So he came out on record saying Barry approached me about helping to kill his wife. Honey, not bunny. But okay. So anyways, he says this on like in an interview or something like that. And the journalist was like, that's interesting. And the other thing that he said was he told the interviewer that he agreed to help Barry Sherman get rid of his wife. Yeah. So he just like came out with that, and he said that. And so the journalist was like, oh, that's crazy. Would you take a polygraph test on this? And he did. And lo and behold, it was a lie.
Yeah.
And I think that's more telling that kind of like puts him more squarely in the crosshairs than if he actually was telling. I don't know, because that's a lie that you would come up with if you actually killed both of them.
Yeah, well, that's what people say, right? Some people would.
Oh no, it wasn't a double homicide; it was a murder-suicide.
Yeah.
I know this because this guy approached me. Yeah, he approached me earlier, but now we know he's lying about it. And so like that's kind of weird, right? Like, well, very strange.
Yeah, the reality is like what one thing, again, it was conclusive, right? The forensic team, and the reason why it's still an open investigation is because they agreed with the second team, right? Cause of death the same, but the manner of death, now we're 100% with like I mentioned, without a shadow of doubt, this is a double homicide, right? So all these motives start playing in, man. But Chris, I'll tell you, man, like, and I know we had some disagreements here, and now I'm very interested to hear how, because I do want to be persuaded the other way. I kind of got a little of your initial thoughts before the call. So I'm really interested where you're going with it, but you know how I feel about it, man. The reality is I think, at least especially with the way the bodies were staged, I think there was some kind of personal emotion behind like how they were killed. And in fact, I looked this up. I think it's like it's called a personal cause homicide, right? So like, whether it was anger, resentment, or betrayal, or what you named the motive, between people like again, you said it. There's no shortage, right? There was definitely people that wanted to kill him. Maybe people during the litigation. Maybe it was the Winter brothers. Maybe it was the robbers who were like, maybe they wanted to throw it off to him. Maybe they staged it in a way where it's like, crap, like I don't want them to think this was a burglary gone wrong. I'm gonna stage it to be like, make it look like a double suicide, or maybe even a double murder. I mean, we know it was a double murder. The question is, maybe that wasn't the initial intent. Maybe it was to go recover some documents, or, steal some more jewelry. And it just, lo and behold, and that's why I think I really, I think whatever it was is, and I know this is like far, maybe it lines up, maybe it doesn't, but I think the person or individuals who committed this crime had some kind of relationship between, or they had a relationship with the Shermans. I don't know how personal, but it was enough, right? Again, it could have been the Winter Brothers. It could have been anybody under litigation, whoever lost litigation, lost their companies, in litigation with the Shermans. Community members, you never know, or burglars, but they had some personal connection on why they chose the Shermans. And then the way they left the bodies, man, to me, it's like, and I think, you also agree with it. It was staged in a manner that it's like, you can't not ignore that, right? That it was, placed in a certain manner. So.
It was strange. Yeah. But I mean,
yeah, guilt, right? Like, I think there's a little bit, to me, I think there's a little bit of guilt in the end towards the victim. So it's like, maybe they went in there with who knows the original intentions. What I think is they probably met Barry first, right? Choked him out, like dragged his body, or maybe, was, moving throughout the house, realized also that Honey was home. And what happened, right? Honey went with her cell phone, probably was running away from this perpetrator, locked herself in this bathroom, or tried locking herself in the bathroom, but the person probably caught her just in time. And the reality is pulled her. And that's where some of those bruises, which I don't even know if I mentioned that, she had bruises on her face, or I think you mentioned it. She had bruises on her face and, like that were unexplained, right? Why did she have these random bruises? So I think, again, probably also got choked out. And then to the point where it's like, it's not just to pass, for them to pass out, it's took them out, stop complete oxygen from going to the brain and killing them, right? So who knows? But that, to me, I think there was a personal connection. I think the killer retained some level of attachment or guilt towards both of the victims. Dots, what do you think it was, man?
Honestly, it could be anything. I mean, look, we just saw another very recent example of a very rich person that was in charge of a healthcare company got murdered. And if you really look at it, it doesn't seem to be a huge personal connection, because that person, right? We'll just say it. United Healthcare CEO had such a wide-reaching sphere of influence. He could have influenced somebody in a completely different state, in a state that he had never set foot in, just because his company was so big. So, man, I think it's pretty similar here for Barry and Honey Sherman. They were moguls, right? They were moguls. I'm sure exploited, companies and people and price gouged pharmaceuticals and like life-saving drugs. It was public knowledge that Barry was at the head of Apotex Industries or whatever, pharmaceutical. So, maybe there was a personal connection there, because he did have a lot of money and, like I said, more money, more problems. But, there's always the possibility that some just disgruntled person that can't afford their fucking whatever medication is like, nah, you guys are not getting away with this.
Yeah.
Like my mom and dad just died. Fuck yourselves.
Yeah. You think so? You could agree with the double homicide, clearly, right? I think that for sure. I think it sounds like we could also probably agree this was more calculated than what people initially thought. Like this seems like a calculated murder, right? Like it wasn't just some random.
It didn't seem like a burglary to me.
Yeah, I don't think it was a random. I think it was like something happened. It turned into a murder, or maybe it was an escalation of, from a burglary to a murder, right? With that intention to always get to the next level. Who knows?
Yeah, but the fact that there was no other like disturbed thing, like they were showing that she showed the whole house, and the only place that there was stuff that was out of place were the gloves, which nothing crazy, the phone, nothing crazy, and then their bodies, right? I don't think they found blood anywhere. They didn't find a murder weapon anywhere. I mean, I guess maybe the belts were the murder weapon, but. Yeah, so it was definitely staged. Might have even been like a professional hit. We're talking about people with hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars in his inner circle.
Dude, high stakes litigation, right? We talked about, I mean, what does that bring on? Powerful enemies, man. So maybe the powerful enemy was like, dude, let's probably put a professional hit on it. And for all we know, Chris, like what other documents or what other stuff did they have, stored in their, in their house? For all we know, that's probably what they were really after. Maybe. Think it through it. Yeah, maybe a professional hit should be added to the list. Like that's the reality.
Yeah. Maybe so.
Yeah. Well, I think in closing, Chris, I did want to kind of remind the audience, man, something that the Toronto Police Service put out is they like to really remind people local to the area, or if anybody who knows anything, that it's still active, it's still ongoing. There's a $10 million reward if anyone knows anything regarding this case. And you can reach out to the Toronto Police Service. They're actually directing people towards the typical anonymous crime, where people are always told to do anonymous crime reports, which is Crime Stoppers, right? That number is 1-800-222-TIPS, right? 1-800-222-8477. Yeah, that's all we have.
$10 million.
Yeah.
Maybe we should quit this podcast and move to Toronto.
Yeah. Crazy, man. Yeah.
Goodness. Nice. All right, perfect. Well, this is Tequila Talks. Welcome, everybody. I'm going to do this week's Tequila Talk. And our topic today is this guy. He's got a mononym, right? Because nobody actually knows his real name, but he goes by Terrare, right? None other than. And the reason why nobody knows his name is because there's just not a lot of records of this guy. This was a little while ago. When I say a little while ago, I'm talking about a couple hundred years. We're looking at late 1700s France in the countryside. Very poor people, farmers, right? And this is the setting that Terrare was born in. So he was born around 1772 near Lyon, France, to two poor farmers, right? And I guess he had a pretty normal birth. What's up?
1772. What is that? Pre-Vive la Revolution, right? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. The revolution was like late 1800s, wasn't it?
I don't know. Let's see. No, the French Revolution, 1789 to 1799. Vive la Revolution, dude. Yeah, look at that,
okay.
dude. Oh, there we go. Man, I know a little bit of history, dude. What's in this thing, dude? Maybe I ate the worm already, dude.
Right. Before you go to work next time, do a little tequila.
It's only in a couple hours. Yeah, man. It's good.
Yeah, seriously.
So tell me. What'd you say? Terrare?
Terrare.
Terrare. Oh, yeah. Got it. Yeah.
Tarrare. Terrare. Yeah. Okay. So anyways, this guy, his parents pretty quickly noticed that this kid was absolutely ravenous. His appetite was unlike any other kid that they had ever seen, right? So, it was so, I would say bad, right? It ended up being a bad thing for this guy, but it was so bad that by the time he was like 12 years old, he was able to eat his entire weight in beef.
Dude, what?
His entire weight in beef.
He's a fat kid? So, like, how big is he?
No. So he was like a actually relatively skinny kid.
Interesting.
Right, he wasn't big. Yeah, he looked like a normal sized person, maybe even a little small, kind of gaunt, right, like 100 pounds. But he was able to eat his entire weight in beef, right, which is crazy. And he was doing this right from the time he was like kind of a toddler. They're like, this kid fucking eats a lot, to the time that he was, around 12, 13, 14, 15. I don't know. Again, records are not great. Yeah. So we don't know exactly when Terrare got kicked out of his house, but eventually his parents were like, bro, this fucking kid eats way too much. You got to go. Yeah. So they kicked him out of his house.
Yeah, screw that grocery bill, dude. I'm telling you, man, he wouldn't last long in the Moda family, dude. Dude, it's like, hang on, dude. Like 12 eggs, you're out of here, dude. That's for the family, dude.
Get this motherfucker out of my house. You eat way too much. So they kicked out their own kid, bro.
We had 2 lines of chorizo here. Where's it at, dude?
Oh, man. Yeah, so he gets kicked out, and he kind of just like starts making his living as kind of like a vagrant. So he just walks around the countryside of France, goes to like various cities and stuff. He's eating out of the garbage. He's like begging for food from people, for money. He's stealing stuff. And this is when people like kind of, I guess, start to see him or whatever. And he's said to have had a very, very large, this guy was really weird looking, by the way. They said he had a very large mouth, right? And the skin on his cheeks would like sag down, right? And then
what in the hell?
when he would get full or when he would eat, they said he could hold like 12 apples in his cheeks. That's how big his cheeks were. So if he was like chipmunking apples, he could hold 12 in his mouth at one time. And the other thing that was really weird about this guy is
that wasn't weird enough already, Chris. Yeah. The fact that he actually tested the 12 apples.
It gets worse, bro. So around his midsection, right, where your stomach is, he had this flap of skin that was so big that it was said that he could wrap his flap of skin all the way around his waist like a belt and tie it.
What?
So, and when he would get full, right, because he would eat whatever, like his entire body weight in various things, like his belly would like expand to a ridiculous like girth.
Dude, what the heck, man?
Yeah. It says his stomach and cheeks would swell up like a balloon after a meal. Oh my God. And this is hilarious. Terrare would evacuate his meals soon after eating them, leaving behind a truly fetid display that was horrible beyond conception. So apparently, he would eat, and like pretty soon after eating, he would have explosive, like life-threatening diarrhea.
Dude.
That was just terrible. And I had to look up what the word fetid meant. And it means really, really smelly. And by the way, this is at a time when we're talking like 1700s France.
I gotta mention though, man, there's no way this guy would survive in a defensive position, dude. Like he would give away our position, man. You know what I mean? Like, I'm just thinking about if this guy was ever in the military, it's like I wouldn't feed him purposely because it's like, oh shit, okay, all right. Let's hear it.
He was in the military actually, but let me get through the rest of this because the other thing that people noticed about this guy, he's really funny. The poor guy had such a tragic life, but in addition to having horrible, terrible like diarrhea, he also smelled terrible. He was always sweating. Always profusely sweating, and it was said that he stunk so bad you could smell him within 20 yards.
Holy
20 yards,
dude.
Yeah. So I don't know what the hell was going on in this guy's digestive system, but people described it as smelling like rotting meat and animal feces. And again, this is in late 1700s, like in a poor part of France in the late 1700s. So I feel like people really don't complain about stenches that
that's a good point.
But this guy stunk like a motherfucker.
That's hilarious.
which is just ridiculous. So anyways, nobody took him in. Nobody really took care of him, right? So what he ended up doing, because he did have one skill, and that skill was eating. What he ended up doing was joining a traveling circus, basically.
Of course.
Yeah, which is like, that makes sense, right? And you go to a traveling circus. But anyways, they found out that this guy could eat like an entire basket of apples in one sit. In my mind, I go to like, oh, okay, like cool, we're going to a circus, awesome. Like you're all hype or whatever. You get in there, you sit in like the stadium seating, and there's just like a dude eating a basket full of apples. I'd be like, what the fuck is this? This is weird. But I don't know, whatever. Traveling freak show. He ended up swallowing live animals, right, including snakes and lizards. And then he swallowed stones and corks as part of his shocking performances. So gross, he would like eat live animals. This is when he started to like eat live animals.
How do you process this, man? I don't like, dude. Like,
I don't know. Just wait until we get to the like internal workings part. It's very interesting. Yeah. But come military service, right? So I'm sure the traveling freak show got really tired of this guy who just stunk, was sweaty all the time, had ridiculous BO, and ate more than everybody combined. So anyways, he got out of that. And he enlisted in the French Revolutionary Army. The Revolutionary Army. Okay. During the War of the First Coalition, right? So it was like France against Prussia at the time, right? So, and this is pretty funny too. It was said that he ate quadruple rations. So I don't know if you remember, like an MRE, right? Is like 2,000 to 3,000 calories.
Or calories. Jesus Christ, where am I going with pounds? Calories.
And you get 3 days, right? 3 scores a day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Multiply that by 4, dude. That's 12 MREs. Look, if you're working for 12 hours, that's one MRE every hour on the hour for like every waking hour.
That's insane.
That's
man.
insane.
That's insane.
Yeah, that's like 35,000 calories a day. And granted, these guys were in a war at the time, so I'm sure they weren't getting, like 3 squares a day, but still, they were like, yo, who the fuck is this Terrare guy? You imagine meeting a platoon with him?
He's the guy taking care of waste, guys. You need to get rid of brass.
Terrare, go dig the slit trench, homie. Like, get the fuck.
Dude, that's crazy.
So he's eating quadruple rations, right? And he's still so hungry. And everybody's like, yo, what is this fucking Terrare guy? Anyways, at some point, right, he's so hungry and malnourished that he just collapses from exhaustion, right? Okay. So eventually they're like, hey, like, let's get this guy to the hospital. And I'm sure the corpsmen there, or whatever they were called, but they were like, yeah, whatever. This guy just probably doesn't want to be in the war. He doesn't want to work, whatever. But they're like, oh, maybe he's serious. Like, he's like passing out. His skin's like pale. Like, he's showing all the signs of exhaustion and like consumption and malnourishment. And so they're like, oh, okay, like maybe this guy's really being serious. So they start trying to feed him, right? And they put him back on quadruple rations, and he's still, right? That's how he passed out in the first place, right? Quadruple rations and everything. And so he's still really hungry, and they're like, all right, fuck it. We're going to stuff this guy. So they get enough food for 15 men, dude. 15
Bring
men.
Bring forward the dumpster, boys.
Enough food for 15 men, and he crushes all of it, right? One sitting. And they're like,
okay,
they're like, are you kidding me? How the fuck is this guy still alive? Anyways, they started giving him like random shit, I guess. So
now they're experimenting. Hell yeah, true army fashion. Let's experiment on this motherfucker.
Like what else can this dude eat? So they give him live eels, right, which he would swallow whole without chewing, like the way that you would eat a noodle or something. And by the way, I don't know if you know what an eel skeleton looks like. Hang on, I'm going to share my.
Yeah.
I'm going to share this. Because this is crazy. We'll go with Barry Sherman here. Okay. Eel skeleton. Bro, look at that. That's got about 1 million tiny little needles in it. Are you kidding me? He ate those whole and swallowed it without chewing.
Man.
This guy was an absolute machine, dude. I swear to God. Fucking Terrare. Anyways, so swallowed live eels without chewing. They gave him all right. They're like, I'm a doctor, I can do this. They gave him like live animals to eat. So they gave him cats. They gave him puppies. They gave him like lizards and stuff.
Okay.
And he would just eat it. The guy he was like, yeah, whatever. Like it's the military is asking me to do this one thing. So I'll just eat a puppy. And he would eat puppies. And they recorded him as regurgitating the bones in the fur.
Dude.
Yeah. So anyways.
That's not even hazing, man. I don't even know what to call that, dude. Like I'm trying to not say hazing. That's like top level like punishment, man. And what was this guy doing, man? I don't know.
Oh yeah. And, I mean, to be fair with you, it seemed like he was kind of doing it happily because guy was just like max level, like 10 out of 10 hungry all the time, I guess. And so, he would do this until word got to a general, right? A general in the French Revolutionary Army that this guy could eat anything and he would pass it really quickly, right? So he gets recruited by this guy, General Alexandre de Beauharnais, to serve as a military courier, right? So he's like, hey, Terrare, if you do something for me, I'm going to give you 20 pounds of bull organs, right? Like a wheelbarrow full of bull organs. And Terrare is like,
screw the war at this time. Let's focus on Terrare right now. Fuck me being the general right now. You know what I mean? Hey, staff, just take a pause X real quick. Let's focus on Terrare, dude.
Yeah. Like, hang on, this might be important to like MDMP or something. So he's like, all right, Terrare, I've got a whole wheelbarrow full of bull organs for you if you become a courier. I've got this super important note here. I need you to eat it. Go across enemy lines into I don't know. The French had like special forces or somebody that was like behind enemy lines that needed, as there's no radios or like, I don't know, DMs back in these days. So it had to be a courier every single time. I had to send a runner. So Terrari's like, bro, bull organs are my favorite. Yes, let's do it. So he eats this box with like a note, like a military note in it, right? And he's like, I got this. I'm Terrari. But he forgot that he didn't know how to be a spy at all, and also he's like super fucking weird. Like he spent his entire childhood, he was in a freak show, he looked weird as hell, he didn't speak any Prussian, and he was always rooting around through garbage bins and stuff, eating like small animals. So he immediately got outed by the Prussian forces. They were like, that's not one of our guys.
It's fucking stinky fuck.
Yeah, that dude's still like, what's that fucking smell? Oh, who's that guy? And so they caught him immediately, and he very, very quickly spilled all the beans. He was like, oh yeah, you got me, like I'm a French courier, I ate something.
I got a box of me.
Yeah, like I'm gonna shit it out and give it to those guys. They're like, all right, cool. So they beat him the fuck up, of course, right? And then they chained him to a toilet and were like, you're staying here until we get that note. Anyways, this is the funniest part. He shits the note out. Lo and behold, there's nothing of any importance on the note.
If you capture this guy, we wasted your fucking time.
Yeah, exactly. There's nothing on the note. So they keep beating him up, man. They give him a mock execution, and then they're just like, oh, yo, this guy is like, he's not a threat at all. He's completely harmless. He might be a little slow.
We'll send him back. Let's just send him back.
Yeah, exactly. He gets back to the French army.
Oh shit, I'm just kidding, dude. They actually sent him back.
They sent him back to the French army, dog. Yeah, they sent him back to the French army. And the French army is just like, Terrare, you're the worst, dude. Like, you literally can't do anything for us, and you cost us way too much in like rations. So you're good, man. Like, just get the fuck out of here. Like, you suck. And so he leaves the French army, right? And so he's like homeless, and he doesn't know what to do. He continues to like, rummage through trash to try to find stuff. He's like eating small animals and stuff to survive until the war is over, right? I think the war ended. Either that or, anyways, he like gets back with the same doctor that was experimenting on him in the army. And this doctor, I guess, is just like so fascinated with this Terrare character that he's like, hey, bro, like come to my hospital here in Versailles in France, and like we can help you. And so they go through all these different drugs to try to get him to have a regular diet, right? And they try, medical marvels at the time. They tried cocaine. They tried cocaine on him. They tried tobacco pills. They tried opiates. They tried controlled diets. They tried all this stuff. Obviously, nothing's working, right? And so Terrare is just in this hospital, like, it's like suffering, basically. They're like, they don't want to feed me. They're trying to figure out ways to, oh my gosh, I'm so hungry. So there's actually records of him. They found him in a nearby slaughterhouse. Like he got out of the hospital, he went to a nearby slaughterhouse, and he's like eating the scraps out of this slaughterhouse. They found him another time. He got out of his room and he was like drinking the blood of another patient. What? I don't know if it was like from their actual like arm or whatever, or if it was like from a bag. Another time, oh my gosh, dude! Another time, he got out of his room again, of course, little Terrare, and they found him in the morgue, like in the middle of eating a dead
cannibalism.
body.
Oh, dude! Oh god, yeah, man, dude.
Yeah,
this guy, and because again, not like some like Michael Myers or like just like psychopath, sociopath, like no, you're just saying it literally had to do with his appetite. You're saying like the dude was just like constantly hungry, like that,
famished.
Jeez.
All the time. Yeah. And so man, they were like up to here, but the thing that sent them over, right, was,
that's not enough, dude.
wasn't enough. Not at the time. They were like, hey, he's got a medical condition, he's fine, he's whatever, we're gonna help fix him. One day, a kid, like 18 months old, goes missing on the floor above Terrare.
Oh, dang.
And they don't know what happened to him, but they were like, Terrare?
Dude.
There's a kid that went missing upstairs. Do you know anything about this? And he's like, no, I promise. I don't know anything about it. But they decided to kick him out anyway because he's the only person that tried cannibalism or eating humans or anything associated with humans at all. They're like, better safe than sorry. They kick him out. And then there's like not a lot of recorded evidence of like what happens to Terrare after he gets kicked out. But he comes back to the hospital like, let me see. And it doesn't say, I don't know when he got kicked out of the hospital, but he comes back not too long after, and he's got like late stage tuberculosis.
Okay.
And he dies because of this tuberculosis. And then they do an autopsy on him, right? They're like, oh, okay, like let's actually figure out what made this guy's clock tick. Yeah. And I want to read you a passage that is from, hang on. It's from like some medical journal at the time. Let me find it.
It's going to be gross as I don't know what, dude. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. You already know. Oh, where is it? Hang on, mark this. Oh, here it is. Okay, I found it. Okay, so here's the passage. Okay, so at the end of this time, he being the doctor, saw Terrare at the civil hospital at Versailles, where he was perishing in a tabid state. I don't know what tabid means. This disease had put a stop to his gluttonous appetite, the disease being tuberculosis, right? He at length died in a state of consumption and worn out by a purulent and fetid diarrhea. So he shot himself to death, which announced a general suppuration of the viscera of the abdominal cavity. Again, I don't know what that means. His body, as soon as he was dead, became a prey to a horrible corruption. The entrails were putrefied, confounded together, and immersed in pus.
Oh, gross.
The liver was excessively large, void of consistence, and in a putrescent state. The gallbladder was of considerable magnitude, meaning big, the stomach in a lax state and having ulcerated patches dispersed about it, covered almost the whole of the abdominal region. So his stomach was so big it took up like the majority of his abdominal region. The stench, this is so gross. The stench of the body was so insupportable that M. Tessier, the chief surgeon of the hospital, could not carry his investigation to any further extent. Dang. So that was what the inside of this guy's body looked like. It was so infected with bacteria or whatever that they couldn't even stand to like do the autopsy on him. Oh. And the other thing that they said is that his throat, like you could look down in his mouth, hold his mouth open, and you could see his stomach. It just went straight down. And they said it was like you could fit like a giant cylinder in there. You could literally see inside of his stomach from opening his mouth and looking inside of it.
What do you think it was?
Absolutely
like,
insane.
Over time, like, you know, like the stuff he was eating? Like, I mean, if you had to guess, man, like, I mean, dude, you're talking about the whole stomach was in pus. Like, clearly, like you said, infected, all this stuff over time, dude. But, like, holy crap, man. I just, dude, like, I don't know, opening that up and you're just seeing, like, pus, worms, everything, like, all this bacteria. I don't know, man. That's intense.
Well, I mean, you got to think, he was eating, like, like stuff that was not edible. Yeah. Like, let's be honest here. He was eating garbage. Yeah. Like, I'm sure he had like, he stuffed like poked holes in his stomach and then he would eat fucking garbage juice and shit. And I'm sure there was like plenty of bacteria. Just, he got sepsis. I don't know. Like, I don't know, man. He must've had a crazy immune system though, because he lived to be 26 years old. And, but was really interesting. So on TikTok, there's this creator named Momotion. You can go and look him up. And he's this like really skinny kid. He's not that old. I think he's actually probably about like 20 to 25. And he has a very, very similar condition, man. He eats like 30 to 40,000 calories a day. You see him like for breakfast, he'll eat like a giant, like a giant pot, like a giant pot of spaghetti and meatballs.
Holy crap, dude.
Yeah, and the guy's so skinny.
Yeah.
He's so skinny, and the reason why, because like we actually have medicine now,
Yeah.
like real medicine. He has sickle cell anemia, and it's mixed with hyperthyroidism, and then obviously there's like some malabsorption
Yeah.
mixed in, so like stuff just like passes right through him, and like he gets very little like nutritional value from the food that he eats. Yeah, so I'm assuming that Terraria had something very similar. But yeah, that's the story of Terraria, kind of a tragic little chronicle of French Revolutionary history.
Worthy of tequila talks, dude. God. Oh man, that was awesome. That was good, man. All right,
cool.
I'm stopping the recording.
All right. Well, okay. Thanks for listening.
Yeah,
we love you.
Yeah. Thanks.